welcome to the Wealthy Ironworker Podcast, episode, I think it's number 11. We're going to round out what I have talked about is in the first 10 or 11 podcast episodes. And basically what we're doing is I'm building a case. So we're going to go over, before we get into this one, which is going to be on vacations, by the way. Before we get into it, though, however, we're going to go over what the first 10 or 11 were, and you can see a common thread being weaved as we're connecting the dots. All right. So first off, the first one was, which makes obvious sense. If you haven't been following along on the website, then I just had a relatively brief, maybe 30-minute Q&A session. What's the podcast about? And for those of you who follow along on the website, you know it. You've kind of been reading some articles and whatnot leading into it. But for those who are new to the podcast, it was kind of, okay, well, it was necessary at that point. Episodes 2 and 3 were dealing with the stigma. More specifically, I felt to cover, at least in a more broad, complex subject such as the stigma and the difficulties and whatnot from that, we needed to spend the first episode covering what I think is pretty well done, is stigmas that are associated with the trades. And then the second or the third episode overall, Stigma Part 2, was kind of dealing with some tips and tricks and things that we could do, or we could look at doing, or should be looking at doing to address it, if you will. And if we don't acknowledge it, then we're going to get the same thing over and over again. Episode number 4 was how the trades got to this point. Now, that episode takes a more of a big, broad picture, 30,000 foot overview. Here's what the baby boomer generation grew up experiencing, economic stuff. Same thing with X, get down to the millennials, all that stuff. And then we kind of understand, if you will, a little bit more of a nuanced perspective of what the respective generations have dealt with and how we've kind of got to the point that we're at today with the trades. Episode number 5, we begin to talk about passion versus opportunity. More specifically, don't let people bamboozle you into, let's say, never give up on your dreams, always pursue your passion, etc. When in reality, that's piss poor advice when you're thinking about actually beginning and establishing a career. Far better advice, much better advice, far better for you to pursue is the actual opportunity for the whole thing. Wherever opportunity is, wherever the winds are blowing, that's what you want to pursue for the most part, right? And so we're talking about opportunity, and then we dive into, excuse me, podcast episode number 6, which is, do you need to go to college to get a good job, or do you need a college degree to get a good job, depending on however you want to flavor it. And this is also based on another article on the website. Caveat is, no, you don't. It's time to begin to address this from a 4-decade polemic perspective. This polemic has been spouted, this rhetoric over and over again. And so we take a look at that as well. By the time you get to podcast episode number 7, which is if you don't know what you want to do for a living, which I'm not surprised. If you are 18, 19 years old, you're getting into the workforce, you don't know what you want to do for a living. Great. I'm not totally blown away. What the advice should be then from that perspective is go get a job. Come on in. The water's fine. Get into the workforce, begin to gather experience. And then ultimately what takes place is you begin to think, because the likelihood that the first job that you're going to get, or the first full-time job where you're putting more effort into your career, is, okay, this job sucks. What do I want to do for a living? And the dots are being connected, as it were, to line you up to podcast episode number 8, which is the pros and cons of the trades. It also happens to be the most visited article on the website. If you wanted to know what the pros and cons of the trades are, you put it into Google. It's going to come up with, right now, it's the first article on Google's first page. And the theme of it at this point is to weave a thread into follow the opportunity. You don't necessarily need to go to college at all. And where is that opportunity at? It's in the trades. That's the intent, at least with the bulk of the article or website, podcast, and articles for that matter up to this point. Then we jump into podcast episode number 9, which is benefits of being a union member. We weighed them out in the balance, the various benefits that you're going to get And, of course, obviously we've entitled it Benefits of Being a Union Member. Now, for those interested, curious contractors, there will be a podcast for you and the benefits that you get in the future. And if you cannot wait to that point, you can type into Google or go to the website, Benefits of Being a Union Contractor. The article on the website is number 2. And so if you don't feel like you got the patience, you can go over there and read the article, but the website, the podcast, is going to very closely align with the website article on the website. Now we go into episode number 10, which is work-life balance. Now, the reason work-life balance is so important, and it's also the reason why this podcast episode, which is we're going to be talking about vacations, is on the heels of work-life balance. They're kind of like two sides of the same coin, as it were, is because we see a shortage in the skilled trades, or if you prefer, an unprecedented labor demand. It doesn't really matter to me how you spin it up. It's the same thing. Right now, depending on who you talk to, who you listen to, we are around 500,000 in the shortage realm. That's projected to be 2 to 3 million in a decade. And the reason why a decade is used is because the first half of the baby boomers have retired. The latter half will retire within the next 10 years, leaving a windfall for individuals in the trades, which is why it's so important for episodes like How We Got to This Point and others that I have yet to record to really deal with this complex substantive problem. Nonetheless, the projected shortage is going to be 2 to 3 million in about a decade. What are we doing? We're not even replacing the number of people we need to just for those retiring. Never mind usual GDP growth, whether it's an anemic 2% or might be 4, 5, 10%, whatever it happens to be. We're not addressing that. We're not addressing manufacturing onshoring. We're not addressing infrastructure investment. And we're not looking at the totality of work that we have coming up in the next 2 decades and all of the basic ramp up that you're going to see from a skilled trades perspective. We don't even have the people coming in to replace those going out. And likewise, we also, what we don't pay too much attention to is the age gap. And that age gap is, mid to late 20s, maybe 30, 31, and then it's 50 plus. There are people within that realm of the 30s and the 40s, but they're rare. And there's a bunch of reasons why they're rare. We kind of cover some of them in previous podcast episodes, and I've got 1 or 2 off the top of my head that I will be addressing in a more substantive way. Nonetheless, work-life balance, which was the previous podcast episodes, and this one here, which is vacation, are important. And the reason why is because that shortage that we're talking about, it's going to hit us, those of us in the trades, those of us who are doing the work, those electricians and pipe fitters and iron workers and millwrights and etc. Those individuals are going to be the ones who are going to be leaning, the whole entire industry is going to be leaning upon you to help carry things through. And what that looks like then is burnout. All right. I cannot put it any more simply, and I cannot stress it enough. If you've got all those people who are mid to late 20s now, and 10 years from now, you're going to be mid to late 30s. You will have had maybe a decade of experience, as well as those of you who are in your 30s now or 40s. You're going to be in your 40s and then 50s in 10 years from now. And the industry, if we continue down the trajectory we are, which is keep on doing the same thing, expect people to beat down our door, which is not happening at all for that matter, you are going to see, we already have a substantive problem now. It's going to be catastrophic in 10 years. I don't even know how else to term it to make it seem less sensational. It's going to be a substantive, enormous problem. And we as human beings in general, we take these complex problems, we distill it down to bite-sized nuggets, little teeny low-hanging fruit that really doesn't do anything at all except shift blame and whatnot. And we go, this is the problem. And we take this whole huge issue that we've got, and we don't go, we're not any further along in solving it is really the gist of it. So those of you who are left, like myself and other people who are out in the field doing the work, and as that 10-year mark begins to approach and we move on past it, even if we actually address to some degree the recruitment woes and retention woes that we have, the likelihood for the industry to lean on you more, to ask you to give more, to ask you to sacrifice more, to try and give you whatever money they think is going to work for you to get you to stay in this industry, I'm telling you now, the probability for that is it skyrockets. And with that comes being overworked and burnout. All right. It's very interesting to me that as the workforce is being overworked in a lot of ways, and undervalued in many other ways as well, you see mental health become a really significant talking point, and rightly so. It deserves its day in court. I have a mini series planned for this podcast episode, as well as articles that will be fleshed out on the website, specifically talking about things from a mental health perspective, some of which no one is talking about. There are a couple of things that I can think of off the top of my head that no one is talking about. This is a sticky situation to some degree, and some of them are not, but these are talking points that aren't sexy. And because they're not sexy, we don't talk about them as much, but they probably have a significant impact on people. So too is being overworked, especially when you're undervalued. And from a societal perspective, we're undervalued. And from an industry perspective, many of us can say, okay, well, I'm working, 2,500 hours or whatever. I'm working a lot of hours throughout the year. It's taken a toll. It's taken a toll on me physically, which we already know this. But that combination of being overworked and undervalued and being beat down and a bunch of other ancillary things that are floating around like electrons around a nucleus, we go, I'm coming to a cliff of burnout. Which is why I say over and over and over again, and this will also be fleshed out in a podcast episode in the future, recruitment problems today become retention problems tomorrow, because we're going to be overworking those individuals we so heavily lean on without being intentional about recruiting and being attractive to people and whatnot, as what I would call a legacy industry. So that was a long 12 minutes or whatever it happens to be, to set the stage for vacations. Many of us have this, how would I say this? Our vacations we think of are 2 weeks on the beach in Jamaica, sipping Mai Tais or whatever your drink of choice is. And that's the only thing we think about when it comes to vacations. And more perhaps, maybe the title of the podcast could have been, although I'm not going to tweak it now, is time off. And time off well spent. It's a vacation nonetheless. If you're not at work, and maybe you wanted to do what I would say the first on the list, actually, of the notes, is a staycation. I know plenty of guys who do this. They get off work, they take off time, whether it's during a lull at work or whether they're intentional about just, okay, I've got work I want to do around the home. I feel like I get recharged by doing that, and maybe that's the case for you. But being intentional about taking off work, time from work, where you're not stressed, unplugged, right? You're not tethered by either a computer or a phone, electronic device where work can get a hold of you. And you're like, I'm going to unplug for a week. I'm going to spend time with my family. Maybe it's something as simple as taking care of some projects around the house that you bring your kids in. And they get to, you're spending time with them, and you're instilling a work ethic in them, and they get some ownership in whatever it is you're working around, whatever. Let's tweak the definition of, or at least our understanding of, what a vacation is. And it could be something as simple as a staycation. Okay. I also know people who will take time off throughout the year. So Memorial Day or 4th of July or Labor Day, they're not just 3-day weekends, they're 5-day weekends. And they will specifically and intentionally take days off to lengthen that amount of time, because they've already got some time off. And what they'll do is they'll elongate and spend more time off work. Nothing wrong with that. As a matter of fact, I know some people who do that. Some people that I actually respect quite a bit. They're very intentional about what they do. They're also very intelligent when they're on the job and what they do. And that's another way to unplug, to recharge, to take a vacation from work, to intentionally spend time with family. Because as I say, work is going to want to overwork you. I mean, there's no doubt about that, right? Summer vacations. Um, from a summer vacation perspective, how would I say? We a lot of times we think about summer vacations primarily because our kids are out of school. For those of us whose kids are in the public school for them, nothing wrong with that. As a matter of fact, and maybe you don't even know this, but a lot of when you track it back, the reason that kids actually have the summer off was to help mom and dad around the farm, around the house. That's why they had the summer off. And a lot of kids don't know this. A lot of adults don't know this. And so they were working around the home or the farm, and the kids were out of school specifically for that purpose. Let's go and work around the house and do whatever. Maybe that's what summer vacations look like to you. Maybe it's something totally different. Maybe what happens is you take a summer vacation. Maybe it's a week, maybe it's 2 weeks, maybe you're looking at a 4th of July weekend. You're coupling the having 3 days off, and you want to take a week off, and now you only have to take a couple days off from work as opposed to a full week. Whatever it happens to be, it doesn't necessarily have to compute to you being on a beach somewhere exotic. It could be, again, at home. It could be, and this is a nice segue into our next point, which is it could be vacation with your family. That's what we do. We are very intentional about taking the time to drive to the Midwest and spend time with my in-laws, to where my kids can run the farm and spend time with their grandparents that they otherwise don't get a chance to see throughout the year. And we get to stay for free. Basically, I'm not paying for a hotel, I'm not paying for a beach house or a cabin somewhere, and we're getting to spend time with loved ones. Maybe that's what it needs to look like for you. Maybe a complete reset, a complete recharge, a complete unplugging from work in a vacation mindset that looks like going and spending time with family. Maybe it's in the next state over, maybe it's 18 hours over. Whatever it looks like, maybe that's what you need to really focus on and to think about going forward when it comes to how do I maximize my time off, time with family, unplugging from work, and just mentally, not physically, mentally recharging your batteries. I think the next one is important for a number of reasons, and I think a lot of people actually do this, but I just want to like toss it in there when it comes to taking off work. Vacation around holidays. We try to do this as well. I tried to cram a few different things in. We like to spend time with loved ones, and we like to spend time with loved ones where we have a place that we can recharge and the kids can spend time with. But we also like to do it around holidays. And the holidays, there's a lot of angst for some of you. And some people have a difficulty conceptualizing spending time with other people during the holidays for one reason or the other. They have a bad family relationship, or maybe their family has passed away. And there's a lot of pain involved. I understand it. I do. I've got my own set of circumstances that really kind of keep some family members at bay based upon what they bring, all the negativity they bring into the life. I get that. But I need to talk about it because it's a talking point that I think multiple people listening will have the ability to go, well, maybe I should consider going and visiting my in-laws, or going and visiting my brother, or going and visiting my sister, and spending a week with them and just recharging. And I can kind of put myself on autopilot, as it were, to recharge mentally, because I don't have to sit here and where am I going to stay? What am I going to do? I go over and I spend time with family, and I spend it during the holidays. And of course, the holidays that we're speaking of, typically, it's not always, but typically it's going to be either Thanksgiving or Christmas. But it could be 4th of July. Maybe it's Memorial Day. Um, Maybe it's earlier in the year for whatever holiday. Maybe it's Easter. I don't know. But I want you to, in the grand scheme of things, about being intentional about trying to find a work-life balance and taking off time, then maybe you want to seriously consider the time around the holidays or compiling one of the 3 or 4 different ways that we've kind of talked about different vacations to change your definition, if you will, of what that looks like and what we can maximize our time when it comes to spending with our loved ones. Because as I say over and over and over again, and I'll say this many times in future podcasts, you can't get your time back. You can't get your time back. You can always make more money, but you can't get your time back. And that's what I want you to consider. The allure that's coming your way, skilled tradesmen and women, is money. I'm going to pay you more, or I'm going to put more pressure on you. I want you to stay here at work. I want you to give me your weekends. I want you to step up. I want you to do more work. I want you to do more work for me. I need you. I have to have you for, whatever gaslighting that you may experience, to be blunt, whatever the industry can throw at you, you're going to probably see it. You're going to probably hear it. And work-life balance in the previous podcast episode, as well as being intentional about taking time off via vacations and recharging. Because let's be frank, and I would ask a question, but I already know the answer to it. Why do we work? We work to live. I know that it seems backwards that some of us seem to live to work, but I would want a better work-life balance, and that also includes taking time off via vacations to go spend with my family. What good is it if you work hours, you are, for the most part, able to sustain a specific work-life balance? You are able to pay bills. You've got money to do whatever you want. And I've seen this over and over and over again. So many guys have so many toys to play with, and they don't have the time to enjoy them because they always have to work. And that's the trap. That's the trap. And so when we, kind of weave a thread, we kind of go through and connect the dots for some of these points when we're talking about the industry at large and you specifically and where you fit in this industry. My advice is to remember why you're going to work and to not be overworked, but to consider vacations and time off in pursuit of a greater work-life balance, and to remember why you work in the first place. Don't let yourself get overworked. Now, it's quite clear, I think, that this podcast is for the individual, right? The iron worker, the electrician, the pipe fitter, the millwright, the carpenter, whatever. It's for you. It's for you, the individual, to not be overworked. For you contractors who are listening, or somebody has shared this podcast episode and said, if you want to know why I am so adamant about taking time off with my family or whatever, you can listen here. I actually have podcast ideas in my own head for you, how you can be intentional about changing the dynamic and the landscape for your company. You get enough companies involved in this, you change the entire industry in and of itself. But you have to be forward thinking. You have to think outside the box. You have to know that you don't want to work your people to death. You have to build, an environment that the best are going to want to come work for. They're going to want to get on board with you, and not one that you immediately penalize somebody because they want to take time off or spend time with their loved ones. There's a culture that you have to work enormously at. And I mean that in the quite literal sense, enormously, not just to create, but also for that culture, if you will, that you have in your mind to transfer and get through your middle management into everybody else. I cannot tell you the number of times I've seen business owners or individuals who think they got this great company culture and the message never makes it past them. It makes it to general managers. It makes it to whatever your title happens to be. It never makes it to the foreman. It never to the superintendents. It never makes it to the foreman. It never makes it to the guys and gals in the gang. And the whole entire company suffers as a result. And the company owners are caught off guard. You're going to have to work enormously at this for you to try and overcome this problem. So to wrap up the podcast then, okay, my advice for you, individuals, tradesmen and women, iron workers, electricians, pipe fitters, crane operators, and every other trade out there, is to recognize the systemic problem that the entire industry has. Understand that it's only going to get worse until it starts to get better. You can take that to the bank. That's certainly the case. And that because that's going to happen, that you should understand that there are going to be companies, there are going to be end users, there are going to be the entire industry as a whole is going to want you to work more. Give me more, give me more, give me more, give me more. And they may attempt to adequately compensate you. And I don't want to dismiss it. Again, I don't want to dismiss it. But what I want you to think about overall is, what are you working for? Is it worth the exchange? Is my time worth the exchange? It's a discussion point. It's a question. It's something that many of us never really consider throughout the entirety of our working career. Until you get older, you start talking to some old, if you want the truth about this, those of you who are young and who I'm talking about and forecasting for, you talk to the people now who are 50 plus. If any of them have lived from an experience perspective, if any of them have lived and are intentional about what they're doing now, they're not living paycheck to paycheck. They're not, still engaging in substance abuse issues, and they'll take every hour they can because they can't survive without it. You talk to the well-seasoned, the well-reasoned individuals. You know what they're going to tell you? You can't get your time back. And those toys are nice. But when you don't have the time to enjoy them, do you have enough time at all? They're going to tell you the same thing. I'm telling you that what they're saying is true, but you can take it to the next level, what's coming down the pike. Okay? So keep that in mind as you weigh things out in the balance. I want you to stay in this trade for 20, 30 years. I want you to retire with dignity. I want you to be able to look back at the end of your career. I want you to recognize that there's a lot that this trade gave you, whatever your trade is, and that it provided for you in multiple ways. But also recognize that it's a double-edged sword that could work you to death if you don't pay attention, if you're not aware. And those of us who have experience intuitively know this. We are a society that says, air quotes for those of you who aren't watching the video, we are a society that says we value credentials, but in reality, the truth be told, which is right, we value experience. And those of us in the trades, the next 10 years are going to be extremely interesting to watch. Don't let somebody rob you of your time. So make those smart financial decisions. Make those smart economical discussions happen within your family. We got to choose. It's called the pain, the pain of choosing your regret. Like, you're going to choose some kind of pain. Is it going to be self-discipline, or will it be regret later on down the line? I'm just trying to be a voice in the wilderness for you, and I'm telling you, it's coming. So be smart. Take time. Spend it wisely. Be intentional about it. You will never hear somebody say on their deathbed, I wish I wouldn't have spent as much time with my family. They'll always say it. I've heard so many old heads go down to the grave saying, I spent too much time at work. Be smart. Pursue that work-life balance. take vacations, take time off, recharge, spend it with yours. All right? This is the Wealthy Ironworker Podcast. I will see you on the next one.